So Titan Season 2 Episode 8 Jericho is an episode that is fully flashbacks, and if you guys have been watching me for long enough, you'll know that my favorite Titans episodes so far have actually been those that consist of the old Titans, such as Aqualad this season, or in Season 1, it was Episode 2, Hawk and Dove, and that for me was so good on so many levels. And I was very much so looking forward to Jericho's episode, not only because I knew it would go back to a time period of Titans which just fascinates me, but also because I really liked what we saw of Chella Man's portrayal in his role as Jericho, which I felt he gave off an instantly likable vibe, and it's been a season-long itch of mine anyway, and I'm sure for many of you guys as well, just as to how Jericho died in the past amongst the other blank spaces this episode had to fill. So up until now, we've had little info about what happened 5 years ago along the way, and this episode would definitely give in some of those answers that carry on from that moment of where Dick Grayson deliberately ran into meeting Jericho at that record store. Also, as a bonus this episode, we got some Deathstroke flashbacks, which I believe were teased from the showrunners for quite some time, which show his origin, and a really couple of cool fight scenes in this episode, which gave us an opportunity for Wondergirl to try and kick Slade's ass, but that kind of ended up a bit. Yeah. And also, of course, guys, the Robin versus Deathstroke fight, which was just great to see unfold on screen. We also got other answers which many have been speculating about for quite some time now, like who was the real target that Deathstroke was after in the Aqualad scene where Garth died, and a whole bunch more. But guys, if you go on to enjoy this video, I'd really appreciate it if you would hit the like button, as it only takes 2 seconds of your time and just really shows your support for the channel and the Titans content. So thank you so much if you go ahead and do that, and of course subscribe if you're brand new to these reviews, as I post DC Universe content fairly regularly. But let's get into this video, and if you couldn't tell, guys, I know a lot of you love this, some of you don't like it, but this video is going to be fairly long because I've got so much to say about it, especially that ending scene between Deathstroke and Jericho and Robin. So I suggest sitting back, relaxing, or maybe go getting a drink or a snack, because you're going to be in for quite a bit of a breakdown of this episode. So let's begin. So immediately I just want to start off by saying that I felt like this episode did a good job at showing the Titans back in 2014, follow up the death of Garth by initially manipulating Jericho into telling the Titans more about his father. Now, this was shown through flashbacks to where we saw Jericho meet the Titans at the beach, and this whole episode was pretty important as it gave the audience a lot of missing context behind what the real beef is about with Dick Grayson as the leader of the Titans with Deathstroke in present day. Now, Jericho comes across as a kid who's just happy that he's made some friends, but we can't forget the tragedy of what happened to Garth, which of course is a powerful motivator to the Titans in this episode to help them maintain their stance with using Jericho to get closer to learning about his father, despite how they also feel like they're turning into something that they aren't through using Jericho. Now, what I liked about this episode in terms of that is it also starts to bleed through to Dick Grayson quite a bit, in where we had that brief scene between him and Dawn this episode with him saying, like, you told me to be Batman. Now, this version of Dick, as Dawn puts it herself, more or less continues to carry on to get worse right up until the events of Season 1, I'd say. Now, obviously, Dick Grayson has come a long way since that version of himself, which he's still internally struggling with in present day, with the last episode having his whole mind as a running stream of self-criticism through the form of Bruce Wayne. But the events of this episode with what happens to Jericho only solidifies himself going down that dark internal struggle we see him battling with in episode 1 of Season 1, where in fact he just kind of puts a lot of it on Bruce Wayne / Batman, which he kind of takes back in episode 1 of this season as well, in Wayne Manor. But as we now know, all the way into Season 2, there are also a lot of other factors that crafted that version of Dick Grayson, which will ultimately break through towards the end of this season, where he would have evolved into Nightwing. Like, all of this is just, you know, foundation laying, and a lot more layers on top of that to become the person he's meant to become. So with the beach scenes with Jericho, this opened the opportunity for the episode to explore a whole range of flashbacks between him and Slade, which involved his Deathstroke origin, which was linked to Hive. Now, it was really cool seeing his origin where he got injected with that serum, and this just also showed us some great scenes of when we saw Slade becoming his Deathstroke, the Terminator self. For example, in that scene where he breaks out of his restraints and like slays multiple people down that hallway in this facility, like all while keeping up with each eating an apple at the same time. I just feel like that is just brilliant. I also just liked even seeing the relationship Deathstroke had with his son and family, where he explored how he was never home, or when he missed Jericho's birthday and gave him that bracelet with the Eye of Horus. I feel like this just humanizes Deathstroke a lot more on screen compared to what we've seen him as so far, as this literal kind of Terminator. It's just nice getting that depth into somebody who's usually portrayed as so cold. Yet again, guys, I just want to echo what I've said before, especially with this episode. I really feel like S.I. Morales was just an excellent casting for Deathstroke, and that Titans really gets how to portray this character on screen. And this ultimately led up to that moment where Jericho and his mother was taken hostage for when Slade gets home, and in a very similar way to the comics, even though I couldn't really tell if these guys were assassins or not. I don't think they were meant to be. They were after a buyer's name, and Slade refused to give them that information. Or you could perhaps just argue that with his confidence in his superior enhanced abilities to that of a normal person, he risked trying to get the upper hand in the situation, which as a result nearly saw Jericho die, and his fairly accurate representation of how his vocal cords got cut. Now, we also learned how Jericho got his powers in this iteration, which is, as I keep saying, fairly accurate to that of the comic books, in terms of how Slade said that he must have inherited one of his experiments, which gave him the ability to full-on possess people. And all of this was just done very well in terms of where he just learned from a young age that he had the ability. But in Titans, he tried to keep this from Slade, who after when he found out when Jericho tried to stop that man from getting in the fight with Slade, he said that he must never tell anyone else about his powers, which was kind of a cool foreshadowing to what would eventually happen with the Titans in terms of Dick Grayson kind of trying to recruit him. Because as we all know, Dick Grayson, with his helping people problem, genuinely wanted to get Jericho to become a Titan, which Slade just resents the idea of, which we've heard about multiple times from him, such as when he's called Dick Grayson this charlatan, and how the Titans act like heroes but they're just hypocrites to dress people up in these pretty costumes, but he can see what's underneath those masks. I also assume, on another note, and I would love to hear your thoughts on this, guys, that Rose's powers are also just another inheritance of Slade's experiments of the past, rather than her being subjected to the same serum and experiments that her father was, which, went down in the comics. I'm just wondering if Titans are going to kind of skip past that and make it so that she just kind of inherited them the same way. So I wouldn't be surprised if they go this way, but then again, there has been little emphasis on Rose's past whatsoever, so she's still kind of a wild card at this point. To all of those of you who are having those kind of Rose theories about a Judasy kind of contracty kind of thing going on there, we'll have to ultimately wait and see about Rose's, accurate backstory. I loved how well Jericho's power was utilized in this episode. For example, where he first makes an idiot of that guy in a record store, then he made Hank dance in Titan's Tower, which just dumbfounded the other Titans as to how cool this power is, with Donna even saying all the things you could do with body hopping. And the really sad thing as well is that I can't help but feel that Jericho would have made a really, really cool Titan. Just like, what could have been with Drew Van Acker's Aqualad, just makes me think, what if these people were kind of kept in the show in that way? But, I'm obviously can't really be now unless there was some huge insane twist. I just love the moments when he was looking at the suits and he was so impressed by it all. And yet again, this is what I mean by Chella Man's portrayal. He just gives such a bright vibe to the show, if that makes sense. But this is when the Titans wanted to come clean with him about everything and why they ran into him in the first place. But while all of this was happening, we had Billy Wintergreen alert Slade as to the fact that his son has fallen in with the Titans, and also his mother was having a conversation with Slade in the park to fix all of this. Now, Jericho's mind at this point was pretty much the opposite of when he thought his dad was a hero, because that's what he was told to believe. One thing I do want to say about this episode that I felt was really off is how ham they went on that greeny, yellowy filter. It wasn't present in every single scene, but in some scenes it was blimey, are we filming next to the sun? Now, I felt like they didn't go as mad with this in the Aqualad episode, and I don't mind the blue filter massively in Titans. I mean, I'd rather it not be as prominent as it is, but it doesn't bother me as much as other people. But I felt like the color in this episode wise just looked very, very off, and it was a lot more eccentrically handled than previous episodes we've had. Now, of course, guys, we need to talk about that fight scene between Wondergirl and Deathstroke. Now, this has been a long time coming. I think we've all kind of maybe foreseen that, it would be a missed opportunity, a totally missed opportunity if they didn't have a one-on-one, hand-to-hand combat to get her own back and kind of revenge for Garth. Even though he kind of mopped the floor with Donna Troy, it was still great seeing her have that opportunity to try and get her own back against Deathstroke. Now, I'm not sure if any of you made this connection, but they definitely played a beat very similar to that of the Wonder Woman music, except kind of without all the strings, you know, the main kind of theme for Wonder Woman. But I just really appreciated this because it really added to the momentum of the fight, and it was just brilliant. But we need to talk about how she was led there, and that was by Jillian this episode, who more or less had a security detail, but they all got their asses handed to them as well, just showing how brutal Deathstroke really is and that he can hold his own up against a whole security detail of Amazonian warriors. I mean, this was demonstrated earlier, like when he flung that table or that soldier against the wall. Like, this is how bio super enhanced Deathstroke really is. But in this episode, we also learn out who the real target was back in episode 4, Aqualad, for when Garth died. And I initially thought, now this isn't me saying, oh, I was right or anything like that, but I thought that initially it could have been for Jillian. And that very well indeed was the case, because as she put it herself, their work here in San Francisco can ruffle some feathers, which is likely why the contract was put on her head. And obviously Slade is a paid assassin, which, you know, 1 + 1. But another thing that was off to me in this moment, which, you know, I wasn't a massive fan of, was just how different that recording was of Garth sidestepping like that to protect Jillian, which was vastly different to what we actually saw go down in that scene when Aqualad died, which I said was kind of a weird film scene anyway at the time of when we were watching that episode. But through what we saw in this recording, you know, Donna was like here, and the way we saw it originally go down was that he turned around. But in this recording, he stepped all the way over here and then got hit. So I don't know. It just felt like a bit weird to me. And like, why change it so much? Or like, why not just do that in the original episode? Like, was this all really filmed so differently just so we could think something else way back then? But it turns out like, you know, just so we wouldn't figure out it was Jillian, they made him move this much more dramatically and differently from the original recording. Anyway, I could just talk about all the intricacies to this episode forever, but we need to talk about that ending to the episode where Donna activated her distress call, which led Robin to rush after Jericho to where he was meeting his father in the church, which was the very same church in last episode where Deathstroke summoned Dick Grayson, with all of those photos there saying you'll recognize the place when you see it, because obviously this church held quite a gravitational weight to the past, which we're about to get onto. Now, personally, I loved seeing Robin versus Deathstroke. I know some people aren't a fan of like choppy fight scenes and stuff, but I really felt like the mere fast-paced action of this scene was great, especially, as I keep saying in multiple episodes, paired with great music. This stuff just adds so much more to these scenes. I also have a feeling that this fight, or this moment in the episode, will very much so mirror a future fight between Deathstroke and Dick, except where he is Nightwing at the end of the season in his new suit, and compared to this fight where Deathstroke really does brutally batter him, just like he did with Donna, Nightwing will end up having the upper hand in the present day fight scene, and I assume, you know, it will more or less poetically end with Dick Grayson, aka Nightwing, defeating Deathstroke. But ultimately, I just loved how brutal this was. I mean, he quite literally held Dick up in the air as he was impaled in the shoulder, just like how he did that brutal finisher on Donna, like in her back as well. I mean, I don't know. I like the kind of more gruesome approach to like what Deathstroke would actually do if this were real, I guess. However, guys, we've got to talk about it. This is where Slade is about to finish off Robin, and Jericho just jumps in the way and dies. It just happened so quickly, I felt like it didn't have the desired effect they intended it to. So maybe I'm just struggling to believe that Jericho wouldn't have attempted to possess his father, which has been done previously before in the comics, and I know some of you might argue that maybe in this Titans iteration it might not work on Deathstroke, but at the very least it would have been cool to have seen an attempt of possession before he just, you know, I mean, he can quite literally control people, so him jumping in the way like that, it just felt like I would have been fine or a lot better with it if they would have shown an attempt at possessing. So I felt like this moment when Robin was laying on the floor was missing the context of why Slade would go after the Titans again if they ever started it up, which was obviously the beginning of season 2. Perhaps this is the issue I have with this part of the episode, is that it was just missing a scene or something between the abrupt death of Jericho and instantly cutting to to the Titans and shuddering the tower and everything like that. I mean, I totally believe that this moment to Deathstroke personified to him. He'd become so lost in this dark world of being an assassin for hire, and this was a wake-up call with him killing his own son Jericho, which led him to exiling himself to that cabin we saw in the first episode. Which also just lives up to that request Jericho's mother made in the park, where she asked for him to go away so you will never hurt us again. Yet, as I said, and I keep saying in this freaking review, something was missing, which I'm not saying we won't also get to see in the future episode, but for example, in that mini character promotional spot that we have of Deathstroke saying this monologue, which some of you may have seen, but some of you may not. But either way, in this Titans Deathstroke character trailer, if you will, he says, and I quote, "I told him," and he's referring to Dick Grayson here, "if he ever put the Titans back together, I would kill every last one of them, and you're about to learn that I'm a man of my word." So I can only assume that this monologue from Slade in that character spot promo is canon to the story, and it did happen, I guess. I mean, according to that trailer and what we know of anyway, Deathstroke would have likely have given this warning to Dick Grayson as he was lying on the floor as Jericho died, but instead of killing him, he didn't, and he gave this warning. The Titans then disbanded, and years went by to the present day where Trigon's stuff went down, and Slade in his exile then saw Jason Todd pop back up on screen, which as a result of course made Deathstroke return, as per that character spot trailer where he warned Dick Grayson that if the Titans ever returned, he would kill them all, but not as of when Jericho died, because of course he wanted to respect what his son did, I suppose. So I don't know guys, do you kind of know what I'm saying there? Like, as much as I found that fight scene cool and everything, do you think that they should have included like a line from Deathstroke as, Robin is battered against the floor, not detailing that he's going to exile himself to a cabin or anything, like that would happen afterwards, but he says, right, if you ever, bring back the Titans, I'm going to kill each and every one of you, and that's, as a result of the end of the episode, the Titans want to leave anyway, Donna goes to New York, Hank and Dawn get back together, blah, 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 but then, flash forward till today, Titans are back, and he is triggered. I just felt like it was missing that, and it would have made that ending feel a bit more poetically kind of complete, rather than just Jericho jumping in the way when it was missing the possession, and then, end of episode. It just felt all too rushed to me. But anyway, everyone, that is the episode. So I thought that it was a solid Titans episode. I wasn't massively a fan of the color correction, if you will. I don't even know if you call that color correction, just filter on the episode. But I felt like Chella Man, who played Jericho, did an exceptional performance in his role. But all in all, it's not exactly my favorite episode of this season so far. And yes, that's despite it being a flashback. Can you believe it? Like, it's not one of my favorite, but either way, it still gave us some great answers, like who Deathstroke was actually after. It wasn't Aqualad, it was Jillian and stuff like that. But hey, we're getting into the serious stuff now. We've got the context behind the present day scenes. I think Rose is still a wild card. We still need to see exactly where she fits into all of this, and could she be working for her father? That is still very much so a theory. But either way, guys, as always, I read every single one of your comments on these videos. I may not be able to reply to every single one of them, but I love reading what you have to say about the episodes week to week. So let me know all of your thoughts, all of your theories. Subscribe if you're brand new to the channel for more Titans and DC Universe content in general like this. If you actually got this far in the video, and especially to you guys who got this far, I mean, that's amazing. Like this video if you did enjoy it. I'm sure you did, maybe, if you got this far. But show your support by clicking that like button. But thank you so much for watching, guys. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you Titans in the next video. Goodbye.